This is the $500 abandoned boat that I got from a storage unit. And if you're wondering how we got to this point, here's a quick recap. I found this boat on Facebook Marketplace, listed for just 500 bucks. But I knew the seller would get flooded with messages. I offered her 200 extra. She said yes. So the next thing, we're at this dusty old storage unit, and man, it was a battle just to get that thing out of there. We got back home, took out all the trash and junk, and gave her a good rinse.
Look at that disgusting water in there. That's pretty nasty.
We fired up that Yamaha 90 horsepower motor, and guess what? It ran amazing. We gave the boat a full detail, scrubbing every inch, and look at this before and after shot. The boat looks clean, polished, and shining just like it rolled out of the showroom floor. Jack, our official garage dog, helped us out and pulled the old motor off to prep for the new one. Well, here it is. This is a 2008 90 horsepower 4-stroke Mercury outboard motor, and I got it for a great deal. I only paid $1,800 for it. Now, if you're not up to date with motor prices, that's really cheap for a 90 horsepower 4-stroke motor that was made in this last decade. And when I'm done with this, it's really going to elevate the price of this boat and make it look like a way nicer boat than it did before. So let's put that new motor on the boat. There we go. And meanwhile, Jack is supervising me to make sure I do everything correct. Remember, when you're putting an outboard on a boat, you always want to make sure that you put the bolts on and lightly tighten the nut down so you tighten them equally. Because if you tighten one all the way, the motor's not going to want to line up correctly on the transom of the boat, and it could sit crooked, or you could put a lot of stress on the bolts and even break one. So let's bring some weight off of the forklift. So we finished installing the motor and adding the silicone to seal the bolts that go through the transom. We kept working into the night, trying to escape the day's heat, and continued running the cables through the boat. It was proving to be very difficult though, because of the many extra wires and cables that were blocking the path of the new ones. The next day, with the cables already run through the boat, we could finally start connecting them to the motor. We began with the throttle and the shift cables and connected the main harness to the engine. To finalize, we had to cut the console to install the new throttle and shifter. Alright, so my wife is taking the decals off of the motor, and since it was recently repainted, I'm going to put these brand new decals on. Before I added the decals to the outboard motor, I started by using soap and water to help me position them perfectly on the engine. Once they were in place, I used a small scraper to smooth them out and make sure that I got all the air bubbles out beneath them. So we just finished putting all the decals on. Take a look at how these decals changed the complete look of this motor. So now that we finished doing all the basic stuff to put the engine on the boat and make it look a little nicer, we got to start it and find out if it actually runs. Now that we got everything hooked up, let's try and see if the trim works. That's a pretty good sign. Now for the first test start. Oh, that was weird. All right, well, it seemed like it just shut off. I'm gonna try to start it again. That was kind of strange. Huh. Well, it looks like the motor might have a problem after all. So after doing a little digging, I realized that the reason why the motor shut off randomly was because the FSM, which is the part that holds both fuel pumps for the motor, was actually getting drained of fuel. So let's take this off to get access to the fuel pumps. All right, so now we removed all the bolts holding this lower pan down, and now we should be able to just pull it right off like that. We have complete access to the fuel pump chamber, or as Mercury likes to call it, the FSM. So now we can take it apart and see what's going on inside of it. To remove these quick disconnect fittings is sometimes you have to push down on them first to remove the lock so you're able to pull them off. Now that we took all the bolts off, we can pull this lid off gently, of course. You might need a little bit of prying just to get it off of the dowel pins, but you want to be very gentle because this housing is actually plastic. Come right out. Yep, just like that. There we go. And as you can see, this is the low pressure pump, which actually sucks fuel from your gas tank and pushes it in this. And then this is the high pressure pump, which of course sucks the fuel from inside this chamber and pushes it to the fuel rail and delivers fuel to the injectors. The issue is it's starving for fuel. So more than likely, it's going to be something wrong with this low pressure pump or the wiring or even this float switch, because this switch actually controls the level of fuel and tells the pump when to turn on or turn off. So we can easily check that by looking at the wires that it connects to at the plug, checking the continuity with a multimeter, and determining if it's good or not. And we're going to track these wires right here, which looks like these two red wires from the float switch actually goes to a purple and blue wire. So we're going to stick our probe right here, and we're going to stick it right here. And look at that. There's no beep. And just to double check, move it around, and you don't hear anything. And just to show you exactly what that switch does and how it works, I have a brand new one right here. And like I said, when the fuel goes up, it turns it off, and when it goes down, it turns it on. And it's always a good idea to actually check even the new switch, because you never know, it could also be defective. So we're going to check it with the meter, which you hear it beeping. And when I turn it upside down, it turns off. So this one's working. And we're just going to connect this new switch, and just like that, fixed our issue. Now that we put everything back together and double check that all the connections are doing what they're supposed to, we can install this. Now that we put the lid back on, let's put it all back together. First, we're going to start with putting the hoses on, just like that. And this hose for a vacuum. And while doing this work, now I realize possibly why I got the motor so cheap. Because of course that issue, the motor had an intermittent problem where it would turn off and sometimes it would stay running. So the previous owner probably thought there was something wrong with it that he couldn't figure out, and he sold the engine super cheap. I can obviously tell that he tried to figure it out because there's actually a bolt missing that holds this pump module on. Now he's got to put the air cleaner back on the motor, the cowling back on, and try the motor out, and hopefully it stays running. All right, let's see if it starts now. Now we're gonna let it run for a couple minutes and see if it turns off.
A few moments later.
So I was noticing this little nut right here actually worked its way free and wasn't allowing this trim piece to come off. So I got it free, but now I have to secure it again. So I'm going to mix up a quick two-part little epoxy to secure this nut in the plastic so it holds this trim piece once again. And another thing that I just realized while looking at the motor, that I hear this weird noise and it seems like the alternator is going bad. I think the bearings are all rusty. So that's another thing I got to add to the list of parts. Well, look what just arrived. Our new alternator. But I need to open this box somehow. I have an idea. All right, let's check out what we got inside. Oh, there's another box inside. All right. Oh, here is the new alternator. And as we're going to show you in a second, see, this one makes no noise when you spin it. And I guarantee that one is going to make a lot of noise because the bearings are probably going bad in it. And before you do any electrical work on any upward motor, always disconnect the battery terminal. This is the old alternator, and guess what? That sounds horrendous. You can actually hear the bearings making a ton of noise, which it did work, but eventually it probably would have failed, and it would have failed at the worst time, leaving us probably stranded somewhere. Now we got something to pry with, so we can stick that right here. And after we put this bolt in to kind of hold it, should be able to just stick the bolt in like that. Just installing the alternator, and it only took like 10 minutes. And I bet you if you would have taken this engine to the dealer and have them replace that, they probably would have wanted $800 to $1,000 to do something that only took me 10 minutes. Now we got the alternator installed, so let's fire it up.
So I added a primer ball to this old fuel filter to see if I can get any fuel out of the tank. Now this is the part that I've been dreading in the video, because if there's something wrong with the tank, that means I have a lot more work to do, and I might have to take the whole console out and even cut the floor just to fix the issue. So I'm gonna add a little fresh fuel to the gas tank, which the filler is right here, and try to suck some out and see what it looks like. Just to double check, I'm gonna remove this fuel line from the filter and try to suck directly from the fuel line from the tank. There we go. There's the gas. Oh, we got a little bit of water in here. That's not always the best thing. Oh, we're finally getting gas out of the tank, but it looks pretty watery. Now, the good sign is, though, that this gas looks fairly fresh. So that means the tank was probably just empty. And as you can see, the gas is all cloudy, which means that it actually sucked up all the water in the gas. And if you actually look carefully on the bottom, you can actually see the water starting to separate out. And that's what you never want to see coming out of your fuel system. And after doing this a couple of times, well, guess what? We finally got some clean gas coming out of the tank. And that's the way the gas should look like coming out of your boat. So we just finished cleaning out the gas, and the only thing left is to change this old junk filter, which, because I bought the new one on the Jungle website, it arrived the same day and we can go install it. It only cost me a whole $25. And I think looking at the old one, it was time to replace it. So now we mounted the new fuel filter in a different location. And the reason why we mounted it over here instead of here is I usually don't like drilling anything into the transom that doesn't have to be there. I'm gonna replace the hose. Since the fuel system is never complete without a primer ball, I'm gonna cut the hose and add this in the middle. If you don't have a primer ball, you can cause serious issues when you try to start the motor, and if it's been sitting a long time, it's gonna take a long time for the fuel pump in that motor to suck the fuel all the way from the tank. So it's always a good idea to have a primer ball so you can prime the system. Now, with our new fuel hoses and filter, we should be able to get nice clean gas coming out of the tank, which looks like that's what we have. The number one enemy to most boats is water in the gas. So that's why you wanna make sure that you have a good fuel water separator and filtration system that's working correctly.
And for just 60 bucks, we're going to be replacing the bunks, starting by cutting fresh angles so the boat sits perfectly, and then replacing the old worn out carpet with new material. Then we're going to be stapling it all down and putting the trailer back onto the boat. So we're on our way to put the boat in the water and try it for the very first time. Hopefully it goes well. And it looks like it's about to get dark, so we really have to hurry. After all the work we put into it, I can tell you this boat runs amazing, and it's fast. As we were pulling out of the ramp, a guy even stopped me and pointed at the 90 horsepower and asked how it ran. The best part, he actually had the same boat and really liked how mine looked.
And the final thing that'll really make this boat look like a brand new one is replacing these old hatches.
Alright, now that everything's ready, let's go snap some final pictures. And while I'm doing that, here's a breakdown of what I spent so far. $700 for the boat, $1,800 for the motor, $500 on detailing, and $855 in parts. That brings us to a total investment of $3,855. After checking the market, this boat is worth around $9,500. That's a profit of $5,645 if I get that. So what do you think? Can I sell it for that number? Drop your guess in the comments and make sure to subscribe because I'll be posting an update the moment it sells. Thanks for watching.